I'm gonna
Oh,
hit record so we get started. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, maybe possibly you want to go ahead. You about to share something.
no, it's all right. I'm happy to start wherever we want to start on. Yeah, what's the biggest topic of this call? Is it modularity in particular, or just
Do you want to
projects and what's been
hold the
happening?
mic a little closer? It's audible, but it's a
Um,
little.
I almost
yeah,
had the feeling that it's your computer mic that's being used, not the one.
used to,
Yeah, that's probably it.
we'll figure it out. Someone else start.
Oh, this is better though. Cool. Well, I guess that's the question, and I think Phil kind of brought it up right at the start, where I feel like this session is more dedicated, one, to exploring modularity, but it also is pushing this conversation of do we have to build apps in an agent-centric environment? And if we're not building apps, what are we doing? How does it make sense? What are the kinds of tools that we need to be building and exploring? And what design patterns are we forging? So I kind of mentioned a bit of like the themes that would make sense. I feel like one, understanding modularity would make more sense to start off with. Some of the tools that Philip has been building, CRISPR and Chimera, and maybe he can share a little bit about it. I feel like Hollow REA as well fits in really well, and other tools like reputation tools, reputation vaults, those kinds of things. And eventually, I think this would attract what we're starting to call power users, users who are primarily built in stitching together communities or neighborhoods or collectives with some basic generic tech tools. So yeah, that's kind of what this gathering is about. Phil, do you want to share a bit?
Yeah, I'd love to show you what I've been building.
Yeah. And maybe give a little bit of context as well, why you think this is important, because this is also going to get shared on the forum through the recording.
Okay, so I've been actually asked my father the other night when I got my first computer, and this will scare the lot of you. It was 1975.
Yeah.
I wrote my first line of code in 1975. I was like, my God, I'm old. Anyway, so I've been doing this for a while.
I don't think most of us were born back then, but yeah.
No. Yeah, I turned 50 in a couple of months.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed over that time period is that software development is extremely difficult. And the reason it's difficult is because there are a million ways to do everything. 999,990 of them are shit. Oops, swearing on a recording. Oh, well, too bad. I'm Australian. And the other 10 are the right way to do it, right? But every single tool that you're given to do software development encourages you to do the other 999,000 ways that are terrible. And it's difficult to find the 10, right? So good software developers are the ones who find the 10 and know how to work in that space. But everybody else flounders around in all the other rubbish, right? And there's only a very select few people who actually care how elegant the code is. Most people just want to get a job done. Would you agree? No? So, and this is particularly, what's that?
Can I add that the other 10 are also rubbish, but they're just functionally rubbish, so they're good enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, their rubbish is less rubbish than the rest of it. And I've got to say, I still think that the only good software that's ever been developed is some of the music software. Pretty much everything else is rubbish. And that's everything, especially operating systems. Now, so what I wanted to do, and especially in the holochain world, right? Holochain is not only software, but it's a whole new way of thinking of things. And we're supposed to do all this new stuff, agent centricity, and we've got to build it in Rust, and we've got to, and it's just complicated. Like Michael, you've come into this space fairly recently. it's a shit fight, and it's hard, right, to do these things properly, because not only are there now a million ways to do stuff, but you don't really know what it is you're trying to do. So I wanted to build a very opinionated way of building stuff for Holochain. And the opinion is my opinion. And I want to build stuff so that it's fast for me to build new things and for me to test out things and to try things out on things I've already built, and be able to do it really quickly and be able to do it visually as well. So not having to worry about how much I know Rust, but well, I know Rust fairly well, but other people to use this. And so the reason that I say music software is good, and this applies to things like Access as well, but only for this particular case, is that you can, someone can give you a form to fill out, right? And you fill out the form and you press submit and you're done. So at its most basic, you've just used an Access application that somebody has built. Super, super neat, right? You don't need to know anything. Now, you've done it a few times and you realize you need to add an extra field to this form that you've been filling out. So now you go and open up the Access project and you add a new form, new field to the form. Right? So now you're on that incline or that journey of power user. So your skills are now at a point that you can add an extra field to an Access form and it works. Yay. Then you realize, actually, you know what? I need to be able to relate a bunch of things off this particular entry that I've done. And so now you go and create your own form, put your own things in there and relate the two together, right? So now you become a bit more of a power user. And then you get to the next stage where you're like, oh, I'd really like to be able to just automate some of that. So you go and write yourself a VB macro. And then you teach yourself Visual Basic, and then you end up in the space of learning Rust. Like, basically, I've just told you my career. So, and that works. And it works really well, because if you look at the finance industry is 99% Excel spreadsheets and Access forms. And that's what it is. So is the energy industry, which is terrible. All these kinds of things, right? They run off because what happened is some manager or somebody in the industry went, right, I need to do X. They went and found the closest tool that they could. And when you got a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So now they've created their entire industry based on Excel spreadsheets. So I wanted to give people a similar thing to do with Holochain. And that's where I come up with this idea of Chimera. So you start off with, so a Chimera is a Greek mythological beast that put itself together with parts of all the other animals that it could find. And fits quite well with the Holochain, biomimicry thing that we're doing. And I wanted to start off with like super basic. This is somebody who's just using applications. They don't need to know anything about Holochain, to being able to configure it a bit and add in your own functionality that's particular to you, to then going to the next level of creating new functionality that hasn't been built before. And you can do that with what I've built here. So let's have a little run through, shall we? I'm going to hide your smiling faces for the moment so I can see what I'm doing. So this is an Electron app that I built, runs on top of Holochain, and it's a bit disconcerting not being able to see you. Here we go. Oh, look at that one. Right, so here we have the homepage. I've got a menu down the left-hand side here, and your standard kind of chat contacts group on the right. The semicircles of color are people's general availability. So I've set these to particular time zones. So Arthur's in Eastern US, Guillem's in Barcelona, Tom's down the road from me. Errol's a friend of mine that I talk to at night time, and David is in Tbilisi. So these are their general times. So I can quickly have a look over here and get, okay, because this is a 24-hour clock, by the way, to see when people might be available to talk to. And soon you'll be able to do a thing called Whisper, which is like chat. And then here we've got the homepage with my cool Creative Commons image that I found. And a bit of logoing that I've done. So let's get rid of that. So here's some applications that I built. So this would be your, so this is where I'm going to have the wiki very soon. So I'm rebuilding the HWiki as a view app using the same DNA and a couple of other apps that I built here. So down the side here, we've got, so this is your applications. This is a RSS news feed of the blog. So you get the whole thing there, which is kind of fun. There's some settings that you can set. We'll look at this Chimera mode one a bit later, but the idea is that this will not only be your UI, but it'll actually run Holochain consistently in the background as well. So, you know, whenever you start your computer, the Holochain daemon will run in the background, so you'll be part of the network. Show your friends when you're online or not, so whether it's green or red, and Chimera, which we'll get to. And we'll look at parts and CRISPR in a minute as well, because they're more relevant when we get there. So here's a few apps that I've built. I don't really know what to do on this page, so I'm just going to press this question mark. You'll see the question marks are all over the place to give you contextual help. So this one says I can click on an app to get more information. I can click open to open it. If I hover to the right, I'll get a menu. So this verify one, the idea is that that will actually verify that the app that you're running here has the same hash as the one that you were told you've downloaded. So you know, it gives you a bit more security about what's going on. You'll be able to install new ones soon. You can click on the personas up here to get your persona information and profiles next to your name. So if I click this one, then I get the profiles that are associated to the application. And that's the same as going to any website and filling out a registration form and, you know, doing that, except that with Holochain personas and profiles, all this persona information is stored on my devices, not at Facebook or Google or on that particular website. So I have complete control over it. The profiles themselves are actually a mapping to that information. So you can see I've got Philip Beadle and an avatar here, and I've got filter and a different avatar here. That's because I have different personas set up. So these are my persona information, different fields and that sort of thing. And very soon you'll be able to create these yourself. Right. So any questions? Let's just have a quick look at what this is. So if you click on an app, it'll show you what it looks like. So you can see this is a typical Kanban app where you can drag and drop things between different columns. And it tells you what the app is about down here. And then you can navigate back. It does the same for all of these. So CRISPR, which is my DNA modeling tool. Gives you a bit of a blurb down here on it. And the last one is my record label app that I'm building, which allows you to upload tracks, and we'll talk about that soon. But, any questions so far?
Can you share a bit more about CRISPR?
I will. Hold your horses. We're still talking about super newbies, right, who've got no idea what's going on except they want to use an app. The only app I've got, I want to build a wiki next, so that's a bit more accessible for people to understand that. But the one I've got working is this Kanban app. So if we go open this up.
I have a couple of questions before we go deeper.
Okay.
I guess we leave the really technical ones for the end, maybe, because you'll probably go over them at some point, I imagine. But I'm curious mainly in terms of how you package this and deliver it. Is this to run instead of a conductor, or in addition to? Like, would you run multiple Holochain conductors as dev and production separately, or does it just
exactly what I'm doing?
Conductor?
Yeah, we'll get to all of that. I'll cover all that. Yeah, but yeah, definitely. Exact. So remember, this is not just, I'm going through the newbie stuff to show how, especially to Michael, how you can add extra bits and pieces in as for me, right? Which is separate to you. But we'll get to all of that because this is a full development environment as well, including live conductors, dev conductors, and setups for demos and stuff. Right, so again, we've got more help here. So if I click on the Kanban app, I'll go to that for that app. I've got a part editor, and this is also, because these are actually CRISPR apps that I'm building, so it's more relevant to that, but we'll get to that soon. So if we go down to, let's pick the Kanban one and click the Kanban board. You'll see here that I've got, oh, hang on, this one's got tasks in it, but the other one didn't. What happened there? So see how this one's got a task list, but these ones don't? That's because I can configure things the way that I want them to work. So if we just go to a simple one, we've got our Chimera. So this is a normal Kanban app, so once I've done something, I can put it in the doing column, and when it's done, put it in the done column, etc. And there's help all over this as well. So drag and drop nodes, click on columns to remove it or add new ones. You can click to add new nodes or remove the column, or you can edit a note, save a note, and delete a note. Right? So I can edit, invited, whatever, and press save, and it's all updated. That's all running in a holochain conductor at the moment. And we'll get rid of that help. So now got the idea, like, so people can just use it. Imagine this is a wiki app or a chat app, whatever, right? So people are just using it as per se. Now I'm looking at this thinking, I don't really know which ones I should give priority to, because there's no information here about priority, and the way that I prioritize stuff is going to be different to you guys. So what I'm going to do is turn on Chimera mode. And this is where I can add in my own parts. So what I want to do is add in a ratings module to these parts. So I can just select, so these are the different parts that I've got available, and there'll be a whole list of these. So now I can add ratings into the notes. So I can say, yeah, we've really got to do that one. Don't really care about that. Yeah, and that one's done. Now what happened is that added in the UI part and installed a new ratings DHT for me. So it's a completely unique DHT. It's only running on this device at this point. And that's my interface. So now we can go and look at, if we go back to a different board, let's go to this one. You'll see here that I've only got notes in this one. Now, the one I wanted to show you was if we go back and look at the Kanban board, this one, yeah, just need to make a quick adjustment. So now if we go back to the Kanban board, project, which is the same as all the other ones now, it's just got notes. I've just been chatting with Arthur online because we're working on this project together, and he says to me, oh, you know what, I've built a task list so that we can put into each of the notes so we understand a bit more about what we're doing. And so again, I can do Chimera, so that's state, so that's why reset. And we're chatting online, so I'll go into this one, and Arthur said, here, go to Chimera mode, you'll see there's an invite from me. Now what this is the same as the ratings thing we looked at before. This is the tasks UI, but he sent me the DHT, or the DNA, for the information that's in this link. So now Arthur and I are sharing a DHT because I just installed this new one. And now I can see all of the tasks that he's put into that DHT, and we can share the information together. All right?
And if you wanted to, you could just have your own DHT for tasks, but still have a shared card DHT.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Not only that, I can have Arthur's tasks, and I can put my own in. Sorry, that doesn't, that should have its own DHT. That doesn't quite work yet. But you get the idea. So now I can add in whatever I like in here. I could put ratings in as well. So this UI that I'm looking at is configured for me. This is how I want to work. and it is of no consequence to you guys. Right? You can configure your own. If you don't want to use ratings, don't use it. If you don't want to use, if tasks confuse you, get rid of them. Really, completely up to you. And Michael, this is what I was talking about with the agent-centric experience of what you're building. So you can build things and then build what I'm calling parts. So then you can just plug those parts in. And Vue's got a really neat model for doing that, which is why I'm using it.
Wait, so just so I understand, there are like, so in the Kanban you have like the, what are they called, swim lanes, like the doing, done, and then in each of those there's some collection of, I don't know what the term is, like object thingies, and on those you can plug in any number of different apps. Is that the right terminology?
Parts.
Parts, okay. And then you can configure
applications and parts.
Yeah. Okay. And this is just a template that happens to have 3 swim lanes, but you could have any number, or they could be in a different organization.
Now you can add your own. So now I can say, right, that one's done. I've done that, chuck it in there.
Cool.
So now this particular project, so it's hierarchical stuff. So all these projects are in like a library, one DHT, so multiple projects. So you can start another library and have your own sets of parts and projects in there. And then you can control the permissions in that DHT. So
and
the
Phil,
sorry.
I think what confused me last time, but it's much clearer now, is the Chimera mode. What I'm wondering is, why wouldn't you just have a button in the normal view saying add components? Like, why is it this sort of off the side thing rather than in there?
Good question. The reason is because you're immediately looking for that, right? But my wife is never going to use it. And I don't want to confuse people, right? So what I've done is the help is now context sensitive as well. So this detects that I'm in Chimera mode and gives me more information about how to use it. But if I turn that off, right, that information is not there anymore because that's confusing to people who aren't using it. Remember that people who write code are a very, very, very small part of the population. And this stuff all just seems obvious to us. But if you show these things to the general public, it just frightens them, which is why the chat thing on Facebook is just simple. You can't do anything, right? It's just super simple. It's because people can use it and can't break it. So that's what I'm trying to do here is I give people an experience that is super safe to use and they don't have to worry about it. And if they want to then investigate, how do I configure things? It's pretty simple to chat to somebody online or to find out that, I wonder what that does, and experiment with it.
Yeah, perfect, thanks.
Cool.
Is it, just a question here, actually maybe 2. One was, so is the idea that, are these apps actually built with your CRISPR tool? Is that the idea? So all the way of structuring your application that you're showing is something that you allow in the CRISPR?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And the other part was, how about people who are more worried about minimalism and having only the things they need on their computer? Because this seems like a whole package of things. And how do I get only what I need? Because it seems to be a little bloat for me if I take this perspective, of like, for example, there's all these things about choosing if I want to auto launch all chain on start of my computer, but I do it with systemctl services. So like this, how do I get to
so you have just
the parts
completely
actually
gone. Yeah, so you're in a space of your own, right? So what I'm doing, this is for people who can write Rust and know what you just said, systemctl and all that kind of stuff, right? This is a way to maybe learn how to do it and build your own thing. I'm not trying to cater for everybody here. I'm trying to cater for people who get up to that stage of learning VBNet. Right? If you're in the space of building your own DNAs and being a minimalist configuration on Linux and using particular builds of Linux distros and stuff like that, right? Cool. You don't need me. You're in your own space. So I'm not trying to do that. This is a way for people to use Holochain, do some slight configuration, and then follow a very, very strict pattern on how to build new functionality.
Thanks.
All right. So you all want to see how to build new stuff, don't you?
So Phil, I've got one question.
Sure.
Thanks. Sam here. So I don't think we've properly met, but
Pretty dark where you are.
yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
About those notes and task lists, are they already in the application of Kanban, or are they shared from another application?
They are individual parts built into that I built.
So could they be used from the Kanban one and then used on another one?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, let's have a look at that, shall we? So we've still got, let's turn Chimera mode back on and we'll go back to my other passion, which is writing music. So I built this track player, music player system. And let's turn that off first. Right, so I write minimal techno. I built this app myself, so you can like skip through tracks and all that kind of stuff. If you've ever seen SoundCloud or Mixcloud or any of those kind of other music sharing apps, it's a very similar idea. And I used a thing called Wave Surfer to do the wave of the actual track. What I wanted to do here was build a new way to distribute music. Because at the moment, as soon as you release a track, you sell maybe 5% of the number of copies that are out there, because someone goes, hey, Sam, this is a really cool track. And then I'll send you the MP3 and that's it. Right? Because there's no incentive for me not to do that. So what I wanted to do here was be listening to someone else's shared music. So Sam, you've written a track and it's called Chrysalis, and I'm listening to it and going, this is really cool. Instead of me then copying it and sending it to my DJ partner, Errol, and going, hey, let's play this track next time we're out, which could be in the next 6 months if we're lucky. I wanted a way for me to be able to just go, I can make money out of this now by hitting the hollow button. So once you hit the hollow button, what happens is that this track, which is its own DHT, now gets hosted on my hollow port. So when other people come along and start listening to it, according to the rules that Sam has put into the DHT, like you can listen to 15 minutes of it, or you can listen to it 3 times, or whatever the rules are before you have to start contributing hollow to it, I get part of that info. I get part of that income. So now I'm promoting the track because I like it, and I'm going to make some income from being part of the hosting network that supports the hosting of it. So that means that it's counterintuitive for me to just try to copy it and then send it to somebody else, because now I've missed out on some income. Right? You know, this could be a big banger, right? And you know, could make some money out of it. And if I'm now hosting a particular genre of music, then my website that I've put up, which I've got a static website builder as well, I could make some money out of it. Right? And I could be known as, you know, come to Phil's website because he's got this particular type of music, and people will use that to share. It's all well and good to be able to stream stuff off the internet, but if I'm playing a bush party out in the middle of nowhere and I've got no internet access and I still want to play this track, I can then press the holochain button. And what will happen now is I now become a dedicated host of that track, which means it's on my machine, which means I don't need the internet anymore, and I can play it directly off my machine. And very soon, with the 2020 version of Holochain, we're going to build a virtual file system as well, so that you can so I'll be able to use my normal DJing software Tractor and play this track directly out of Holochain, even though it's still a Holochain binary. We're going to use, I think it's called Fuse, as a virtual file system, so that Tractor still sees it as a file, even though it's not really a file, if you know what I mean. super cool fun. So to get back to your point about other ways of doing things, I collaborate with my partner Errol on writing music. So I can then enable Chimera mode, go back to that track, and I can see that Errol J has asked me to collaborate on a track. So this is, I'm not just using this to add new bits and pieces into UI, but also to like enable humans to interact in a more interactive way. Because at the moment, trying to collaborate on music is quite clunky. You know, you have to sharing the files and stuff. It's really, really messy. But with the holochain and the virtual file system, Errol and I will have literally the same files out of this virtual file system. Right, where were we? Let's go back to building some stuff, shall we? So, if you're going to look at CRISPR,
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, is it right that this is a bit an alternative to Holoscape because you can also run different types of different applications within it, right?
Not really. Holoscape allows you to host any holochain app as a window in Holoscape. I'm not interested in doing that because, again, that's the million ways of doing stuff. This is an extremely opinionated way of doing things. So if you're going to do this, you will be using Vue and Vuetify, and you will use Vuex and the way that I've set up the pattern.
Yeah, I was going to
All right.
Sorry, Nicholas.
Sure. Do you want to go first?
I was just going to ask because I think this answers the other question I had as to whether like the apps for this environment have to be authored in this meta framework in order to work with it. And I'm guessing this is the yes. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, and this is a
that also answers.
Yeah, it's a really popular pattern, right? It's Vue with Vuex for state management, and inside the store, that's where I interact with Holochain. I'll show you that in a minute. Right, so here I have a bunch of applications at the top, and there's a bunch of parts at the bottom that I'm building. And again, we've got help all over the place. So I was having a bit of fun with acronyms. I don't know if some of you guys have seen this before, but in the genetic DNA editing world, CRISPR means clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. Most people don't know that. But the Cas9 is the way that they do the gene editing with the bacteria and the protein, which can literally slice out any gene out of your DNA or out of any DNA and replace it with another one. It's super cheap. You can buy these kits off the internet and you can CRISPR yourself to your heart's content. And people are doing it. There's all sorts of different CRISPR therapeutics being developed now. And it's a very open source kind of space because people are trying to beat the big pharma to the punch. And so they're making these things open source and unpatentable, which is really cool. And given that holochain, we use the same biomimicry approach, we have DNA, etc. And when you're going to edit a DNA, well, what are you going to do? You're going to use CRISPR, right? But for me, CRISPR means clone, rearrange, identify, socialize, personalize, and repeat. And Cas, funnily enough, is content addressable system. So having a bit of fun there. Right, so on this page, you have all these projects. So you can go to the Kanban board, which we looked at. You can go to the part editor. So let's have a look at that. Just minimize this. I'm having a little trouble with the size of this code window. But the idea here is that this is the UI control, and this is the actual code for it right here. And very soon you'll be able to edit this code and be able to see the changes here. And so rather than, using Visual Studio over here, using Terminal to build something and then firing up Storybook to look at what it looks like and then running it in your app to see what it looks like, and none of those things will line up. And you've had to do 6 different things to change one line of code, which I find super frustrating. I wanted to be able to just see it. So that's what's going to happen. And you can try it out. So you can drag and drop things and all sorts of stuff in here. And you can see all the help and everything that I built and all that kind of stuff. So that's the part editor. And if we go back to here, so let's go and look at the code. So here we have CRISPR, and on the left side is this is a code tree, and this is the pattern that I use and the layout that I use for code and tests for all the DNAs that I build. And I find it seems to me to be fairly self-explanatory. Again, we've got help. All right, so you click on the Kanban board, or click on the zone name in the tree to see the model, and click on any file to see the code. All right, that makes sense. So, you know, let's look at like the JSON file. So here you can see this app's called JSON, called columns, sorry, and then we've got zones down here. So if we click on the columns zone, we get a nice SVG model that I built. These are all drag and droppable, etc. Blah, blah, blah. You can see what they are. And so this uses remember that pattern we talked about in the Sunshine Coast, where you had the thing that you were going to list, and I don't care what it's linked off. I'm just going to use an anchor and just list it off that anchor. That anchor is the parent. So here for columns, they are going to be listed off a project. So each of the columns comes off a project. But I don't care. You could list the columns of anything. So that's why I can put ratings into notes, and I can put tasks into ratings, and you know, I can configure my own UI, because it doesn't, the parts don't care what you hook them off to. And this is a lot of what you did in REA, wasn't it, Sam?
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of the terminology David was using in the Go prototype, with the way you've defined like exclusive link constraints and things between records there. My biggest question looking at it is how do you have some constraint between these things rather than it being completely free form, and whether you do or not, I guess, is the other question. But yeah, it's like, it's hard to explain kind of looking at it now. How do particular content types link to each other? I guess this is within the same DNA, but across DNAs too, and whether it's zone traits that you use to kind of say that, you know, this is a thing that lists profiles, say, and being able to predict that the API endpoint or the link you're matching to is a list of profile IDs.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean, and that's where I'm getting to. I haven't got that complicated yet.
Okay, cool.
So what I'm building here is what I need at the time, in such a way that I can keep making things more complicated.
Cool,
Right,
cool.
so this is a standard pattern. You've got anchors that are of an anchor type, go to the root anchor. And then we have the entry type over here. So I built all this with SVG. It's really, really fun. So you can see how cool my spacing is. Look at that. SVG is really fun, by the way. Right, so what is this thing? So this is what I'm calling an entry type. And it correlates to what's in your definition file of how you define an entry type. So at the top here, this is called a Kanban column, and it can link from a holochain anchor, and the link type is a column link. So you'll see that it is linked off these columns, and it can also link off the list column as well. This unique thing is that if that's true, I insert a GUID into the first entry, and so that way you can have the same content but different entries, if you know what I mean, because it is still really difficult to manage having the same content being the same entry in multiple places, if you know what I mean. So this allows you to make them unique. We do run into the problem of the update loop in holochain Rust, where if you update the same entry back to something else before, holochain gets confused and doesn't know which entry to pull back. So there is a hack you can do of inserting the previous header into the entry to make each one unique along the track. Again, it's called a hack because it's a hack. But in 2020 version, they're using the headers to make sure that the entries are unique. So I'm not gonna bother with that at the moment because I'm so close to changing the code generation from here to 2020 that that's gonna be really cool. Right, what else we got on here? So these are the fields. You can manage the fields by going up here, and you can see I've got title and order. Add a new field, call it time zone for want of something better to call it. String, give it a description. Save. And now you'll see that in the entry, I've now got a new field. So this is a way for people to manage the data that they store in the entry. The pattern that you see of these different anchors and stuff like that, this is what I'm calling like a DNA pattern. So you can say, right, this DNA inherits all of like the pattern of this one. So that when I create a new pattern, which I'm going to be doing this week for personas and profiles, which will have a different layout and different ways of using anchors, that'll be another pattern that people can use to clone to make new functionality.
And Phil, and with regards to private and public entries, it's always the entry and not the fields within an entry that are defined, with your CRUD rate.
Yep. Yeah, so that's going to be a pattern that I'll be building very soon as well, because one of the big problems with the way that everyone is building holochain apps is this nasty little thing. Let's just find a file somewhere. DNA zones, code source lib. All right. This here. Everybody's got it in their head that making it HC public means it's available to the UI. That is not what it means. HC public means that anybody who can access your DNA can impersonate you and do things as you. Not good. So the next thing I'm going to be building is capabilities. So it's called capabilities. So, and that applies to private entries. So private entries and capabilities are really good for doing things like subscription-based content. So let's say I write an article and people pay to subscribe to it. What happens is that becomes a private entry on my in my devices, and then you've paid to access it. So I give you a capability grant, which then allows you to send me a direct message. I interpret the grant, say whether or not you're still valid to read it, and then I will return you the content. So that's where we're going very soon to demonstrate how that works. Because it doesn't work too well in holochain Rust because some of it's not implemented, but in the 2020 version, it will be fully implemented. Right, what else we got on here? So these meta fields are not stored in the entry. These are fields that you can get from various headers and links and things around the entry. And the idea of doing that is that these are fields that you pretty much want for most applications. Like you want to know who did it, when it was done, who updated it, when it was updated, and an address and that sort of thing. So I can get those from the entries, the header entries and stuff. And that's all part of this pattern.
Why is there a difference between the ID and address?
Okay, so the ID is the initial entry address, the very, very first one, right? So when I create an entry like this, and it's linked to an anchor, this anchor, or this link goes from the base, so the address here, which is the base, to the target address, which is the ID of the entry. That doesn't change. Even though I update the entry multiple times, that first address never changes, right? The address changes each time, because as you update an address, if you change the content, you get a new hash for the content. However, the original address doesn't change. And because when you do get links, I'll get the original ID back. And then with that ID, I can say, get me that entry, and Holochain will go through all the entries and find the current one.
And is that something that you've built in here, or is that Holochain native? like that.
It's native to holochain. Oh no, the ID thing is my pattern,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
the way that holochain works by doing get, if
Yeah.
you do get entry on an address, it'll find the latest one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've landed on the same pattern that I had in HoloREA as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I have kind of pondered whether it's appropriate in all cases or whether this might be like a read-heavy
not.
workload kind of a version. Because
Yeah,
in the write-heavy cases, I've thought about, you should be linking to the latest version so you're not having to traverse that whole list of updates each time.
exactly.
In which case,
That's
the
why I
writes
had
become kind of heavier because every time you update a record, you have to go and update a bunch of links to point to the latest version as well. So there's kind of overhead in that.
Yes. Yeah, I know exactly
kind of,
what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's where, that's why I put in address as well. So address is a meta field that goes back. So when I do an update, I don't have to traverse that whole list because I know the address of the current entry. I could just update that one, right? The only time that the ID is used is when you do get links. Right? So then it'll do get links and then it finds the latest one and that gets returned to your UI. And because in your UI, you're not going to return 1 million entries, right? You're only going to return 10 or so, because you page through them. That is a fairly low overhead. But if you are updating an entry 1 million times, right, then you would need to look at doing, what I was thinking of doing is instead of staying on the initial ID is then allowing the ID or that link to be updated to somewhere in the recent history. So then you only go a chunk of that. And then, again, these will be different patterns that we build as the core of the DNA
and
as we go.
Get it in do you have it in the entry content on the initial entry? Like, do you use entry address to pre-calculate and inject it? No, you only know it after you store it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll show you the code for that. Oh, imagine that. Do you want to see the code for it?
Yeah, sure.
Here we go. So this is what happens. So it creates the entry, gets the entry address, and then, that should have updated to task. And then, links the entries together based on that anchor. All right, so this is the code to create an entry. And down here, this is the validation code for doing permissions. So I'm doing validation in 2 steps. First part of the validation is who's allowed to do it. So we'll validate your permission. And then if that passes, then we're going to do whatever custom validation your app needs on that particular entry. Because if the person who's trying to do it isn't allowed to do it, there's no point doing any further validation. So you can see here it says anyone allowed to create. Right, cool. So I don't want that. I want to change that. I want to say that only the author's allowed to update and no one's allowed to delete one of these Kanban entries, right? So if you do save, something's gone wrong. Sorry. Right. Do that again. No. Something's dying. Right. So that teaches me for playing with things last night, doesn't it? Anyway.
It does, but it's kind of a great error. Like the depth of that stack you're getting back in the UI. It's done loads with the developer experience in terms of the tool stack even behind this.
Exactly. That's why this is really cool, right? Like now I know exactly what's gone wrong because I changed a bunch of parts in some things. So I can see here that there's something undefined, right? Template parts. So for some reason the Kanban's not getting in there. Let's try another one. Let's go and look at a different one. Let's try notes.
Just a side note, we're going past the hour, so in case someone wants to drop off.
Okay. Yeah.
No, if anyone wants to drop off, don't worry. Yeah.
So what happens when you do the permissions? It actually updates the code. Did it update? No, it's not working because I've broken the template. But that would then give you the code for author only allowed to update. And it also removes the delete from here. So that way you don't have to worry about the code. You can just press the buttons and away it goes.
Where is that code actually living in your file system that it's picking up in that bubble?
I'll show you in a sec. I don't know if this is
that borders on another question of mine, which is what if there is import functionality here for existing projects, and how much touching up code might be needed to get a current project?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
Again, I'm trying to build things from scratch like this, develop some patterns so that then we can possibly import some other things. But all this code is generated by I've got a pattern I'll show you. So I've got this folder called templates. So this is my origin pattern, the first one, and it's just got very short pieces of code in it. So the lib file down here just has a bit of declaration stuff in it and the first two entry def things in it, none of the actual code that I'm using. And that's because if I say remove or no one's allowed to delete or update, there's no point putting in the declaration here for delete and update, so that doesn't show up. And then all the individual pieces. So lib delete just looks like that. And then if I'm using delete because of the permissions, that code will get in there. One thing we did do with the permission, no, where's the permissions thing? If you say that no one's allowed to delete and that function's not there, I'm still leaving the permission check in there to make sure that somebody hasn't tried to hack their entry, put it into the DHT and try to get it into the network somehow and then get you to validate it, because then when you validate it, you'll go, well, no one's allowed to delete, so you can't do that. So it's like, belt and braces. So that's how all the code's put together. And I did the same for the tests as well. So these pieces they match to the permissions. So if anyone's allowed to delete it, that's what's in there. But if the author's the only one who's allowed to delete it, this is the test. And it's the same for the code down here, these permission rule templates. So if anyone's allowed to create, which they are, because you can't stop that. But if author only is allowed to delete, then you have to check, is the person who's trying to delete this entry the one that wrote it? So you can do that with old entry and new entry. And same for update. And then you'll see here that if someone's trying to delete it, but you've said no one's allowed to delete it, always returns an error. So Rust, although extremely frustrating to get started with, is super elegant once you get the hang of it. Right, so that's how that's all built. And then once you're happy with your model and you've got all that stuff, you press this button up here and it generates all the code for you, which is it writes all that code to disk, and then you can do things like actually run your tests, which is what I just did. This failed test is the update. Update in Holochain Rust doesn't work so great because the timing's out. That's why that one's failing. But you can run tests against all the code that's generated, because it generates the test code for you as well.
Just to summarize and anchor it a little bit, so what we're effectively looking at is a compile time development environment for creating holochain DNAs out of zomes.
That's right.
Like a dynamically remixable zomes, effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least that's a subset of what you can do. But yeah.
Yeah.
And built on holochain. I think that's really awesome.
Everything's So at the moment, all of this template stuff is files, right? Because I'm still working the pattern and trying to figure it out. Once I've got it actually fully sorted, these will all be entries in the holochain DHT, all right? Which means that then if you want to now modify this root pattern and do something else, you'll be able to branch it, because you can just make new entries, right? Or not new entries, you can make a new anchor called Pospey's Awesome DNA, and then you can modify some branches. So you'll point to all the original ones, and if you change an entry, your link gets changed to that new entry. so that my original one is still the same when I pull those entries off that anchor. But when you pull your entries off your anchor, you get the modified ones. All right, so you essentially have Git as a native thing inside Holochain.
Is that for UI components as well as backend zone code?
That will be, yes.
Wow,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Right, so that generates all the code for you, runs all the tests. You know what's really frustrating though? Is that every time you do this and you got to try and go and check out what your app looks like, right? You have to go and put more data, you have to type stuff in, and it's just annoying as crap, right? So you can use, which I discovered a few months ago, if you use Triorama as your testing framework, which of course you do, Triorama creates a temporary conductor with temporary conductor files in your temp folder and just overwrites them every now and then when it runs out of folders. But what you can do is if you run your tests and then copy those conductor files to somewhere else and rerun them, you now have running conductor with that information still in it. So what I've done here is I am running all 3 of my DNAs, and I have 4 players. And what that does is that creates 4 conductor files like this. And that's all done for you automatically. So when I run setup, it runs this demo file, which is a test, against those DNAs. It then outputs all that files to this conductor output file. And then it reads through that file looking for using config path and gets the configs out and copies them into my root directory. Here, so now I've got a new conductor file that has got keys already done. It knows the DNA hash. I don't have to update that. And it's already assigned me a new port. So I've got 33,000 there, 33,001 on this other agent. Right, so now I can run 4 agents all at the same time, which is exactly what's happening here. Right, so this is Holochain running with Sim2H local, a local Sim2H, and 4 agents. So they're all talking to each other. And I don't know if you've seen Holochain Playground, but this is kind of fun as well. This is actually hooked up to those nodes.
That's cool.
So you can see those nodes I'm running here. This is hooked up. So at the moment, GM is making it so that you can select the DNA as well, because at the moment it just picks the first one it finds. Yeah. And so that you can see here, this is the Kanban one. And so you'll be able to select the different DNA. So I'll be able to select Kanban, notes, tasks, Chimera, CRISPR, all that kind of stuff, all running at the same time.
So could you explain what's going on in the playground? So this is Kanban, 4 agents, and each one of these.
Yes. So this is the Kanban DNA or JST, and you can see it's got a root anchor in the middle with the different anchors around the outside for each project, and then each project has a column. So this one will be doing, this one's done, and this one should be do, right?
And they're all shared by all 4 agents.
This DHT is shared by these 4 agents, yeah. So what you can, so to show you that one, if I quit this, I can actually run another command I've got called, so if I run nf start, right, so if I, no, not that one, is it the one? Yeah, I do that and then go, so that's already running, that's the conductors. And then I've got a one to run all the front ends here. So I can run all 4, no, not that one. Where's my, too many package files. Is it this one? Right, yeah, so I can run a bunch of different agents here. So, where the fuck is it? I had one that ran all 4 before. CD Chimera. should be this one. Yeah. Electron serve all. There we go. Doesn't. Let's try it. So we go back into here. Let's do Chimera. See, it's running on the 2 different agent ports. No, that isn't what it was. It was I had a proc file for it somewhere. Oh, there it is now. Right, so let's do that because it's in the wrong location. You guys use Foreman to run multiple terminals at once? Right, so we go yarn start. Oh, that's better. So you can see it's going to run 4 different Chimera front ends now. There's 4 different agents.
Yeah, nice. I haven't seen that before. I always end up using this NPM module called NPM runall to do parallel execution like that. It's a pain because it needs to be downloaded by Yarn before you can run it, whereas Procfile doesn't. It's just a native NPM thing, right?
Yeah, and what's really nice about it is that it shuts down things properly. So when you do Control C and you try to kill a process, it actually kills it, and it will kill all 4 of these slowly, properly.
Yeah, the Node module does a pretty good job of it as well, and I think it's probably the only thing you'd be able to use on a Windows system. Maybe I don't know how Windows handles proc files, but yeah.
Yeah, I really like the different coloring so you can see who's doing what.
Hmm.
Right, so now we've got 4 different agents that are starting out. Let's minimize this and see what's going on. One here, one here. This one. Right, so now I've got, so this one's connected to 3301. This one's on 3303. So these are different agents. Even though they say they're all the same person at the moment, that's because I'm still building personas and profiles. And this one, right. So now if I go and look in Kanban folder for, I'm gonna pick one of these, go to Kanban one, right? So I've got that there. Let's add a new note in here. Demo. So go in there. Now if we go and look in here and go to the same project, which was also Kanban. There you go.
Like magic.
Magic, yes. Now, the next thing I'm going to be doing, because I have to do refreshes to get the new updates, is that each of these agents will have their own name and stuff, name and avatar at the top here. And I'll be able to detect who's online and using this particular DHT, and then send them an instant message and go, hey, here's a new update for you. But having this ability, right, means that I can now test things like multi-agent, things like chat. Like how do I to do direct messaging and things like that. And this was super easy to set up. And I just run the 4 agents in the background, and the 4 agent stuff demo thing is just this. It's just triorama tests, right? I'm just putting in the columns, and then when I got the columns, I just add the notes into it and add the notes to the tasks, etc. So this is how I can keep wiping things out and restarting and not having to re-enter a whole heap of data. And then I've got my 4 different agents running.
Can I ask how you bind the keys of those agents in Triorama to the ones you're using in these UIs?
Through the port. So when you create them.
Okay, right. Yeah, okay. So they're all HC public and they're all just driving it through the socket. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, they're all connected to their own WebSocket of their own conductor. What else we got?
Yeah, let's maybe take questions or closing questions. There's a few people
Yeah.
messaging me saying they really want to stay and they want to stay, so they're just asking how long we'll go for.
Yeah, no, but that's done.
I'd say another
So,
15 to 20 minutes from now. We should wrap
yeah,
up.
make it 12:30. I'm getting hungry.
Would you mind if I reflect a little, Philip?
Please do.
I think any further demoing you might be running towards is probably just going to be further demonstration of what I'm saying anyway. And it's already kind of really hit me. You said a while back, you don't need me, like if you're a serious dev and all that kind of stuff. But I think I disagree. It's a really epic and important bit of work that really breaks down the barrier of accessibility between people with technical skills and those who do not have technical skills, and that's really important. Just having this kind of pluggable UI, and that we didn't get to explore how the UI resolves the backend that's needed to bind to each part. That's the other thing I'm curious about.
Just quickly, I just use UX as the state management. So it's like everything, all the UI stuff connects to UX and uses mutations and all, just normal state management stuff. But any actions inside the UX store, that's where I connect to Holochain.
And so then do you just kind of have it hard-coded per Vuex state module, which holochain DNAs it depends on, or do you do some kind of like code parsing to detect that, or?
No, because it's got the actual name here. So this is the name of the zone. So at the moment, the instance is just the name. But what I want to do with the instance is that each time you add a new instance, that will be a unique, I'll probably use a GUID again. And that'll be the instance ID for the DHT to access. And I'm getting very much to needing to do that now.
I don't know how many on this call would know what I mean. I suspect you would, but watching you drive this and play with it in CRISPR mode, it feels like looking at a Lisp machine to me. Like,
yeah, you're the 15th person that said that.
There you go. There you go. And for those that, Lisp being the weird language that was so powerful that everyone was scared to use it, and we're only just coming to terms with now. And I guess in a lot of ways, Rust is kind of, it comes from the same school of languages.
Yeah.
This thing that you're building here in terms of the UI and the way that it makes composing functionality and experimentation accessible, it's a big enough leap. Like I've seen the way these config scaffolding efforts with Holochain go before, and that's why in HoloREA's repo there's a folder using some node scaffolding tool that's just a bunch of EJS templates, quite similar to what you've got in your templating as just files, because you want to do something lightweight. And there's been a bunch of Holochain things that are all pretty good, but they all opinionated, and they all, they don't really let you take it and run with it and extend it further into something that fits your project. Whereas this looks like it does that to me, at least at, this first exploration. So yeah, I really hope it gets people more involved in it. And I kind of want to say that whether this becomes another one of those efforts with Holochain or whether it really succeeds depends on not just your commitment to it, but on everybody else's commitment to it, and those here, and the way that we as a community work to improving the common tooling and templating that makes our lives easier versus just getting stuck in our own rabbit holes of expertise and focusing on our own projects. And knowing how, where to have the balance to unlock the superpowers we need later as time moves on and all that. So yeah, I really it's an amazing effort. I'm really glad to see it coming together, and appreciate you having taken the time to take something like this on.
Thank you.
Well
yeah,
said.
That's exactly the point. Is what I want to do is get this to developed enough that I can keep building apps myself, and then open it up for contributions so other people can start contributing to it as well.
I think my biggest question is when can I use it? When can I start playing with it? Because it looks so awesome.
Well, if you want, we can have a session together, and because there's a few hard-coded things in here that I have forgotten about because I've been developing it, that I'd like to actually get somebody who wants to code it to figure those things out. So there's still a bunch of stuff that's hard-coded, like the projects and stuff, they don't come out of holochain or anything like that. These are hard coded. You know, you can see I've got folders and stuff and that sort of stuff that's hard coded in for me. But these are the things that I need to start removing, and I'm getting pretty close to the point where I'll be happy to start doing that, because I want to get more of this fully interactive.
I had a couple of questions. I'm wondering which ones to lead with. One, you mentioned this this pattern of moving towards private entries with capabilities. Is that something? Because I don't think any of us are thinking about that right now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what I'll be building soon. So my plan is to build a blogging engine. Have you guys seen this? This is my favorite. Some stuff that's out there is just cool as, right? This editor for Vue uses Prose Mirror, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. You can, so I'm going to build a document editor with this. You can do all these different, these are all the different setups you can have for it. And part of that process is going to be having the document in a Kanban, so you can move it through, you know, draft, review, publish, and then have a choice on publish as to say whether or not it's a private entry or goes into the DHT. And that's, so I'm working with Arthur on working out how the capabilities and that private entry stuff works.
Can I ask a question on this particular topic? What content type are you planning on storing post content in, like this kind of rich text stuff?
This is a JSON object.
So it's at JSON, is it? Or it's just a JSON object, some internal structure for the whole thing?
Yeah, so it stores it as JSON, all these nodes.
Yeah, so you get an AST that you can at least kind of parse, I guess. Yeah, that's cool. I'd recommend having a look at json.org because it's like a protocol for rich text. I'm glad you're not using Markdown because it's not at all a protocol. This isn't a protocol, but at least it has some structure, so that's cool. But yeah.
Yeah, and this is a really nice, like there's some of the things you can do, like floating menu. I really like this one. So you can like start, you know, as soon as I go to a new line, then I can decide what it is. Yeah. New line, right? New line, etc. You know, so there's some really neat productivity stuff that you can do with this as well. And it also does code highlighting as well. So really good for doing code blocks with highlighting. But yeah, so getting back to it, so I'm going to use this to build a document editing app that will go through different columns in Kanban, and then you get to decide whether or not you publish it publicly or it's private and subscription only.
Yeah. And the other question is, and maybe I'm not equipped enough to really get into it with you. I'm glad Boss B's here, is around bridging and just some of the concerns GMs raised around bridging. And I just wonder how much it impacts this conversation, like breaking things down into as modular things as possible. Like, for example, issues around warrants.
Yeah, I haven't come to a case where I need bridging yet, but I am imagining I will soon, especially for doing things like managing membranes to DHTs and stuff like that. So I haven't got there yet, but I have been talking to GM a couple of nights a week, and yeah, will be soon. So again, there'll be another pattern for that you'll be able to implement.
Cool. Yeah. So personally, what excites me is just the kind of the kind of community-driven tooling we can build with this. Like I feel like some of the stuff you shared today is more peer-to-peer, but I feel like for communities, this could just go insane. Like the kind of forking, the kind of designing, the kind of conversations that you start having. And that excites me.
Yeah, and that's the thing I wanted to promote is that agent centricity. Like this is my holiday. That's why I called it your personal, what did I call it? No,
your personal holochain dashboard. No, experience.
Yeah, your personal holochain experience, right? And,
Yeah.
the reason for that is that how I do things is different to other people, and I want to do it, and I want to be able to do things my way. Even though there's an opinionated way of doing it, I should be able to configure things to, and I can build my own stuff. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like within the community, there will be one shared opinion, like this is the culture that we share, but within that culture, there'll be this, freedom to play around and experience that community in your own terms. And I think that'll be really cool.
Yeah, so another thing I'm going to build is, like a social media feed as well, and a way to organize events.
Yeah. Yeah, and I saw the little ratings thing. I'd love to chat with you about it. That'd be cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Other questions?
Are we going to put this recording on YouTube? Can we?
We can. That's the
yeah.
I'll pop it up on YouTube and share the link. And just before, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know how close Holochain is to making a big noise about it, but this kind of thing feels like it's demonstrative of everything that makes the platform unique and, an evolutionary leap forward. There's no blockchain demos I've ever seen that look like this, And
I'm happy to put it up.
The tooling that you're looking at, that Sid's talking, you're both talking about in terms of communities and tailored interfaces and stuff. It's things that Bob Haugen has been dreaming about and beautiful for some decades, I think. So yeah, I really look forward to the way that the snake eats its own tail and all the UI design, social experimentation, and collaboration kind of stuff.
Well, that's why I really want to be able to add in some REA stuff, like, for this particular thing, this is, an economic event, and I want to be able to go, right, plug that in there, and just press that button and I'm done. I don't have to stuff around with it. And then I can go, oh, that didn't actually work. I can just pull it out. Because, sorry.
Yeah, let's convert some EJS templates to some Rust templates. Let's do that. Where's my brain going with this? No, sorry, I'll come back to it if it comes to me.
But on that note, someone just messaged me during this conversation and said, can we have an REA demo next week? And see how this plugs in or hashes in with Modularity and CRISPR and Chimera. That would be cool.
We can do that.
Yeah, it would be cool. Actually, I'd really like to see how we can integrate those two, because that would be superpower.
Yeah.
So the thing I was going to ask sorry, Sid, delay is fun. The thing that I was going to ask that it makes me wonder about is, in some of the modularity conversations we've talked about, sort of the goal that Sid and I would say you are all aiming for, having seen this demo, is composability at a DNA layer. And in order to do that, there's some patterns that sort of necessarily emerge about having a kind of membrane DNA that coordinates who's part of a group that all these services belong to. And we did talk about, because there are some technical challenges with that, particularly around warrants and how you deal with rule violations. And I think we might be getting closer to having clarity on how those can work in that model. But the other alternative is zone composition and having a way to really fluidly move between updates of a whole app. And I wonder if you're thinking about this in terms of config transference between DNA iterations, and how you might go in and edit a DNA that there's a network of people collaborating in, change some code and redeploy and keep moving. Is that something you're thinking about with this?
Yeah, that was the idea of having the core pattern. So what I want to be able to do is say, here's my core pattern, what I call it origins, that one, right? And I've got 4 different DNAs built off it. I literally want to be able to go in there and change that to Holochain 2020, repress the button on each one, and then they're all generated in 2020.
So then the question is, all the users of the pre-2020 app, how do they move to the 2020 app? Do they just chuck all their DHT data and start again? Or is there an upgrade import feature?
Yeah.
It's something that's core work. Yeah, sure.
On me. It is something I've been banging on about though for years. Like, how are you going to do the upgrade? So we'll see. I know that Arthur and Dave are working on it.
Yeah, I've had conversations with Eric about it as well, and the ideas he has make a lot of sense, and I think they'll work. But they're just complicated to build, yeah, and it's not the urgent priority right now.
Yeah.
Well, great guys. Thanks, Phil.
No worries.
Thanks everyone.